The 22nd of June, 1941. Under the code name Operation Barbarossa, Nazi Germany invades the Soviet Union, its ally in the war against Poland. Among the first territories to be occupied by Germany is Belarus, officially called Belarusian Soviet Socialist Republic, a territory which prior to the Nazi invasion had been under Russian control for almost 150 years. Within just a week of the invasion, the Germans capture the capital, Minsk, and immediately implement their genocidal policies. Among the first to be targeted are the Jews, who are confined to ghettos where they face extreme overcrowding, severe food shortages, and starvation. Along with the Jews, Hitler also intends to exterminate the Slavs, the dominant ethnic group in the region, whom the Germans view as racially inferior. As a result of Nazi policies, the local population is subjected to mass murder, shootings, starvation, and forced deportations. One of the worst atrocities committed by the Nazis on Belarusian territory is the Khatyn massacre, during which in one day, the Germans and their collaborators will burn 149 people alive, including women and 75 children. The main perpetrator of this massacre is the Nazi collaborator Hryhoriy Vasiura. Hryhoriy Vasiura was born on the 9th of February 1915 in the Ukrainian city of Khatyn, then part of the Russian Empire. Before the war, he worked as a schoolteacher, and in 1936 Vasiura graduated from the Kiev Military School of Communications. The Second World War began on the 1st of September 1939, when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. Less than 2 years later, on Sunday, the 22nd of June 1941, under the code name Operation Barbarossa, Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union. 3 million German soldiers were supported by Finnish, Romanian, Hungarian, Italian, Slovak, and Croatian troops. For Nazi Germany, this attack was not an ordinary military operation. The war against the Soviet Union was a war of annihilation between German fascism and Soviet communism, a racial war between German Aryans and subhuman Slavs and Jews. Following the invasion of the Soviet Union, the Nazi regime unleashed a campaign of unprecedented brutality. As the German military advanced, Nazi forces including the SS and Einsatzgruppen, which were Nazi mobile death squads, systematically targeted civilians, particularly Jews, communists, and other groups deemed undesirable by Nazi ideology. Entire villages were wiped out in mass executions, and millions of Soviet prisoners of war were subjected to starvation, forced labor, and summary execution. At the time of the German invasion of the Soviet Union, the 26-year-old Hryhoriy Vasiura commanded a signal unit of the 67th Rifle Division. During the Battle of Liepāja on the 28th of June 1941, he was wounded in the thigh and taken prisoner. Vasiura was sent to Stalag 3A, a prisoner of war camp located about 50 kilometers south of Berlin. Within the first days of captivity, he voluntarily agreed to collaborate with the Germans, and by February 1942, he requested to attend a propaganda school supervised by the Reich Ministry for the occupied Eastern Territories. In June 1942, Vasiura was fully released and granted the right to move freely across the territory of the Third Reich. After completing propaganda school in October 1942, Vasiura was sent to Kiev, where he joined the 118th Schutzmannschaft Battalion, which consisted of former Soviet soldiers and Ukrainian nationalists. Vasiura quickly rose through the ranks. Starting as a platoon commander, he became a chief of staff, replacing his predecessor who had deserted in December 1942. In practice, the unit had a dual leadership. Officially, the battalion was commanded by a German officer, SS Major Erich Körner, but in reality, it was Vasiura who held full control. In December 1942, the unit was transferred to occupied Belarus to conduct punitive operations against partisans. These operations were part of the Dead Zone policy, aimed at destroying hundreds of Belarusian villages to clear the land of civilians and resettle it with German colonists. From autumn 1942 to July 1944, Vasiura and his battalion participated in dozens of such actions. During the occupation, 627 villages in Belarus were destroyed in 60 large and 80 smaller punitive actions carried out by various units. Vasiura personally participated in these punitive operations, giving orders for executions. He tortured, mocked, and shot people, often in front of his subordinates to set an example. In the forests near the village of Kamińskaya Sloboda, located in the Minsk region, where many Jewish residents hid after mass killings in neighboring settlements, Vasiura and his subordinates personally executed 50 inhabitants. They threw grenades into dugouts where people were hiding. This was just one of many atrocities Vasiura committed throughout the Minsk region during his time there. Once, near the Novolnya railway station, Vasiura saw a child searching for food near a train. He grabbed the child by the scruff of the neck and shot him. Within the battalion, Vasiura was known for his exceptional cruelty, even towards his own men, and maintained authority through absolute force. When he discovered that some members of the battalion planned to join the partisans and had already established contact with them, he personally beat and executed the offenders in front of his subordinates. This atmosphere of fear and brutality was further confirmed by testimonies given after the war. Private Hryhoriy Spivak, a member of the 118th Schutzmannschaft Battalion, testified against Vasiura saying, "People in the battalion were afraid of Vasiura. Once, he sent me to get supplies and strong liquor. Usually, he would order the village elder to have people bring us what we needed. He drank the liquor, but didn't bring back the pork fat. Vasiura was a big man. He hit me on the head with a belt buckle and forced me to lick the blood off the floor." In February 1943, the Nazis launched Operation Hornung, deploying a significant number of German troops and local collaborators in the occupied Belarus. Their mission was to root out partisan resistance, destroy villages suspected of aiding the partisans, and eliminate or capture civilians believed to be supporting the guerrilla fighters. The Nazis concentrated heavily on the area around Minsk, where they sought to establish a dead zone, cutting off any potential support for partisans hiding nearby. Among the commanders in this area was Hans Wilke, who embodied the Aryan type that the Nazis idolized, having won a gold medal in shot put at the 1936 Berlin Olympics. As a policeman, Wilke was promoted to lieutenant for his Olympic triumph by Nazi leaders Adolf Hitler and Heinrich Himmler. Wilke also served as a guard in prison camps, and by 1943, he served as one of 3 company commanders in Battalion 118, a unit primarily composed of Ukrainian auxiliaries. They operated closely with the notorious Dirlewanger Brigade, a German unit composed of convicted criminals, many of them murderers and rapists, who had been free to serve Hitler. Its leader, Oskar Dirlewanger, was a convicted pedophile, as in the 1930s he had raped a 13-year-old girl from the League of German Girls and was involved in the molestation of other underage girls. On the morning of the 22nd of March 1943, Hans Wilke was traveling in one of 3 vehicles on the Minsk highway when Soviet partisans ambushed the convoy, shooting him in the shoulder. Wilke staggered out of his vehicle after being wounded, only to be shot again in the back, this time fatally. 3 more of his men were killed in the fighting that morning, and following the attack, the partisans retreated to the nearby village of Khatyn, located approximately 50 kilometers northeast of Minsk. By the time the Nazi forces and their collaborators arrived, the partisans had already fled the village, leaving only civilians behind. Due to a lack of manpower, the Nazis chose not to pursue the partisans and instead called for reinforcements via radio. On their way back, they executed 20 to 25 forestry workers, suspecting them of supporting the partisans. Vasiura personally fired his submachine gun at those attempting to flee. In the afternoon, members of Dirlewanger's unit arrived as reinforcements, and together with Vasiura's battalion, they surrounded the village. The fact that the partisans had killed an Olympic medalist likely influenced the extreme severity of the reprisal awaiting the villagers. Unaware of the earlier attack on the Nazi motor convoy and the death of a German officer, the civilians, young and old, women and children, were forcibly driven from their homes and herded into a shed at gunpoint. Once all the people were inside, the Nazis locked the door, covered the shed with straw, doused it with petrol, and set it on fire. As the flames spread, the trapped villagers managed to break down the door, but those who tried to escape were mowed down by machine gun fire. The burned victims also included women with infants in their arms, as well as a young woman who had been raped by Dirlewanger's men before being locked inside the shed with the others. 149 people, including 75 children under the age of 16, were killed by burning, shooting, or smoke inhalation. Afterward, the village was looted and burned to the ground. Vasiura directly oversaw the policemen who herded, burnt, and shot the villagers, and personally fired at people inside the burning barn. Vasiura continued serving in the 118th Battalion, spreading terror across Belarus. On the 13th of May 1943, he fought with his men against partisans in the village of Dalkovici, where he ordered the village to be burned. 2 weeks later, his battalion executed 78 people in the village of Osovi. As part of the anti-partisan Operation Barbarossa, Vasiura committed further atrocities in Novaya Vileka and the surrounding areas, where he forced villagers to run across a minefield to clear mines. Those who could not run or move too slowly were ruthlessly shot by him. A few days later, in the village of Staraya Vileka, he ordered 17 children, 7 women, and 6 men to be burnt alive in 2 barns. The destruction continued as Vasiura's battalion burned the villages of Makovye and Uborok, leaving no survivors. Later, Vasiura joined the 76th Waffen Grenadier Regiment of the 30th SS Grenadier Division, where he finished the war. After the war, Vasiura tried to conceal his service in the SS. However, in 1952, he was arrested by investigative authorities on suspicion of collaborating with the Nazis, and the Kiev Military Tribunal sentenced him to 25 years of imprisonment. However, in September 1955, he was amnestied under a decree issued by the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the Soviet Union. Following his release, Vasiura relocated to a village in the Kiev region of Ukraine and became the administrative director of a local state farm. Under his leadership, the farm achieved impressive results, but workers often complained about his harsh management style, as he was known to brutally beat employees for poor performance. Despite this, Vasiura received multiple awards for his work achievements, joined the Communist Party, built a large house, and received various state honors. Despite his dark past, he also secured identification as a participant in the Great Patriotic War. Vasiura married and had 2 daughters who became teachers. Regarding his conviction, he maintained that it stemmed solely from having been taken prisoner during the war. Over time, he became an honorary cadet of the Kalinin Kiev Military Signal School and frequently gave speeches to young people, portraying himself as a heroic frontline signal officer. However, according to his colleagues, he never celebrated Victory Day on the 9th of May, a day dedicated to honor the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany and to commemorate those who had fallen. Instead, he typically met with 6 other collaborators who lived in the same village. In 1985, Vasiura, a self-proclaimed combat veteran, demanded the Order of the Patriotic War, an award given to surviving veterans in honor of the 40th anniversary of victory. However, an archival search revealed that Vasiura had been officially listed as missing since June 1941. Further investigations uncovered inconsistencies in prior interrogations, including those involving Vasily Meleshko, a former comrade of Vasiura who was executed in 1975 for collaboration, and his role in the burning of the village of Khatyn. In November 1986, Vasiura was arrested by the KGB, the main Soviet security agency, on suspicion of participating in the Khatyn massacre and transferred to Minsk. The criminal case was reopened, officially citing newly discovered circumstances. With few survivors of the Khatyn tragedy remaining, investigators painstakingly gathered testimonies from 26 witnesses. Many of these were former soldiers of the 118th Schutzmannschaft Battalion, who were serving sentences in Soviet labor camps and prisons. Survivors of the massacre also testified, providing chilling first-hand accounts. Throughout the investigation, Vasiura denied his guilt. The case grew to 14 volumes, and investigators meticulously reconstructed the timeline of events leading to the Khatyn massacre. Irrefutable evidence was presented, proving Vasiura's direct participation in war crimes. The court established that during punitive operations under his orders or by his own hand, at least 360, mostly civilian Soviet citizens, were killed. When Vasiura realized that further denial was futile, he finally confessed, shouting, "Yes, I burned your Khatyn." Because the communist functionaries were concerned that a public trial of a Ukrainian war criminal would undermine the official discourse of the brotherhood between Soviet peoples, the trial was private. In December 1986, the tribunal of the Belarusian military district sentenced Vasiura to death by shooting. He was also stripped of all his awards. Vasiura appealed the verdict, but the military collegium of the Supreme Court of the Soviet Union denied his request, citing the exceptional severity of his crimes. Hryhoriy Vasiura was 72 years old when he was executed by firing squad on the 2nd of October, 1987. His body was buried in the forests near Logoysk, located approximately 38 kilometers north of Minsk, the same area where many of his victims were also laid to rest. There were no tears shed for Hryhoriy Vasiura. Thanks for watching the World History channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.